Welcome to Through the Eyes of a Maine Guide. Every journey holds a story. By sharing the wisdom of those who came before us, we keep their legacy alive for generations to come. Join me, Brennan Lane, as we explore the wild through the eyes of a Maine Guide. Hey everybody, I got Paul here with me. We're going to go over the little introduction / background of what this new series is going to be about.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Thanks for having us here and doing it.
I got to tell you, I love the concept.
So it's called Through the Eyes of a Maine Guide. And one thing that I want to be able to cover and touch on is the history of Maine Guides and some of our forefounders of how they got started and how we become to where we are today. Getting it down on video format or whether it's a word format, and my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids, this is all history. This is as important to me as Independence Day and stuff like that. There, this is part of the history that's designed my lifestyle.
There's so many old timers, especially in northern Maine, that are great deer hunters, great outdoorsmen. That their story is going to die with them. And I think about when I run into these guys, and a lot of them have passed since I've thought about this stuff. I'm like, man, when these people go away, their story goes with them.
Yep.
So when you had mentioned you were doing this, you had this idea, and you said you had it for 4 years or something?
Yeah, well, it's been a while now, and it's the biggest. It started with just clients that have been pushing, they'll hear stories from the guides in camp around the fire, stuff like that, and pushing them to write them down or whatever because they want to publish them. And by hearing that so much and with it a few people that I've grown close to that are no longer here that have passed, it's their stories are gone.
Yeah, you missed that
I'll
opportunity.
never be able to hear them stories again. Yeah. And this way I can always go back, or anybody can always go back and hit replay 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road and listen to the same story.
It's so you had a bunch of guests here today. And just me sitting off in the background with one of them. Well, with all of them, to be honest. But there's, super interesting. I just find myself sitting here entertained as opposed to paying attention to what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, stuff like this needs to be put out there. So, and I'm big on traditions.
Yeah.
We don't want these traditions to die. You don't want to see this way of life go to the wayside.
No.
So... yeah, how long have you been a guide?
I got my license when I was 18, which would have been 2007. So
No kidding,
I'm 36 now, so 18, going on 18 years.
Yeah, so you're
17
You're
years.
from
Central Maine.
Central Maine,
Yep.
all right. And how'd you end up in the town of Allagash?
Well,
right into,
me and the wife was at a...
I don't mean to drill you with questions.
No, that's fine. Me and the wife was at a sportsman show in Hartford, Connecticut, at a Cabela's for the NWTF there. And the previous owner of the business, Sean, had a booth set up there. And we got talking there, and he said that how, he was been trying to sell the business and this and that. And me and Brittany got talking there. And obviously, my eyeballs blew up like basketballs because I'm like, this is what I want to do every day. I want to hunt and fish and make a living off of it. And Brittany was like, yeah, you're dreaming, whatever. If you can make it happen, make it happen.
Dream.
Well, 3 months later, we're signing papers, and I'm living in the Allagash. And we uprooted our whole lives there and moved 4.5 hours north.
That's awesome.
And that's the other thing, puts it in perspective. I lived in Maine my whole life. But to think I could be in central Maine and still have to drive 4.5 hours to get the northernmost point. You don't put that in perspective until you actually do it.
I look back at my grandparents, and you probably can attest to the same thing. I'd say my great grandparents, some of who I never met. I'll never know what their voice sounds like.
No.
I'll never, this stuff.
This will be here forever. And that's a big reason behind it. Cause I got looking at it and thinking about how fortunate I am to hear some of the stories of the older guides, Donnie Hellstrom, Don Dudley.
Yeah, that must be
crazy, and the other guys of that generation, Wade Kelly, and there's just, the list goes on and on and on. And I want my kids to be able to hear that, and their kids, and go down through, because once it's lost, it's lost.
It is. One thing that's hard to do, and you just kind of mentioned it, you talk about riding around with all these old guides and stuff like that. It can be kind of hard to recreate that same scenario and those same stories
Like,
you know, in a setting like this. But if you think of the old guides that you've spent hours with on roads, the stuff that probably comes up in the stories that those moments are hard to recreate.
They are, and like a lot of it, like I just found myself just sitting there like listening to him.
Yeah,
and there's one that hopefully next time I can get him over here and he'll be on here, and it's just like I sit there, I could ride with him for days and just sit around, drink coffee, and just listen to him talk because I mean the history of the local region, like I mean that's the stuff that they don't teach you in schools. It's gone. And honestly, half the stuff that like those guys have told me for stories, if I tried telling it right now, I'd butcher it. Like I can remember bits and pieces, the 4 pieces, but like what actually made it a story, I couldn't.
Yeah,
that's why I'm hoping by doing this, there'll be more people that will come forward and be like, all right, we want to tell our story. We want to tell some of the stories. And if any of you guys out there listening, you want to, we'll see if we can't make it happen. Yeah,
because I'll tell you, even this first little series that we've shot today, it's been, like I said, I could just sit there and
it's been fun.
I can just sit there and just listen to it. Actually, one of them, I sat here and just talked to him for a while.
I mean, we started at 9:00 and it's almost 2:00 now.
You starting this, Brandon, was a tremendous idea because there's so many stories that need to be told, and you're now providing a platform for people to
step up and tell
that story that no one would ever hear from, ever.
If you like the idea behind this and where this may lead us, please hit share, follow along, and hit subscribe because there will be more to come. This episode was brought to you by Eminem Auto Service in Fort Kent, Maine. If you're ever in the North Country and find yourself in a bind, give Zach a call. Him and the guys will get you back on the road as soon as possible. Here with me today is Wade Kelly of Tyler Kelly Camps. Made the drive down from Allagash.
I sure did. Yes. Yep.
Today we'll just discuss a little bit about Wade's growing up in Allagash and what his stance is on the original guides of Allagash, and how guiding become a 4-season industry in the town.
You know, as far as like guiding or me guiding and how I come to want to be in the field was, you know, I like to hunt and fish and wanted to do it all the time and get paid. No, but it come about like a lot of the guides back in the day. There was a lot of very, very good guides out of Allagash, you know, and a lot of good guys in the valley. But most all of them were it was not their primary. You know, it was something they did in the fall. They went and worked a week for, you know, like my dad. When he first started, he would take deer hunters for his uncle. You know, and that's sort of how that was. When you weren't working in the woods or whatever, you took, you know, guided deer hunt or
little
something
side
like that.
hustle.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, the guiding started for me, and it kind of coincided, in my opinion, with the advent of the popularity of bear hunting. And that's when we first started seeing like what I call the original out of Allagash, out of our valley there, the original guides. This is what they did, you know, and they were based around bear hunting, which would have been in you know, for me, it was like Al and Carol Morgan. They were the very first ones that, hey, this is what we do, you know, and there was a couple others, but those are the most, they were the prominent ones for me.
Around what time do you think that was?
That would have been, probably they started mid to late 70s, I think, something like that, you know. And along that same time, though, we had bow hunting actually really was taking off, you know. And there was a lot of, like the advances in compound bows, and it made it accessible for a lot of people to shoot bows, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, traditional equipment is a little bit more difficult. You know? But so we were seeing that, and we were actually, my dad was bow hunting himself, you know, for bear. In the spring of the year, we had a spring season right up to like 1981, I think it was, or 80, 81, they closed the spring season. So that's where, like I said, that's about where it started for me, looking at it like, man, I can do something with this,
Yeah.
So that's how I got going.
Saying probably the majority of the main jobs were working in the woods at the time, right?
Yep, and that's how we started too. Like with my dad, I guess really when it come clear to me that okay, I can do this, was through a bad accident, and my dad had a tree hit him in the woods and broke his back. So he was the, like the core of the family. So me and my younger brother worked with him in the woods and everything else, and so when he got hurt, he couldn't work in the woods anymore. But he had to have something to do.
Okay.
He was always doing something. So I started pretty big in the archery, going to a lot of shoots all over I've gone to archery competitions from Maryland all the way back in the spring.
Really?
So I started talking to people about bear hunting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that. Especially because the archery, bear hunting over bait provided a great first experience for big game hunting for archery to me. For up here, especially up in northern Maine, because the archery hunting for white-tailed deer in northern Maine was not something you were going to do.
Still ain't
right?
either.
3.5 million acres of forest. You're not going to. So that's sort of how that started there, and. So I started talking to people, and they said, "Yeah, geez, I'd like to do that." So I was like with my father, saying, "Hey, Dad, I got 5 guys want to come up bear hunting. What do you think?" Yeah, we'll put the baits out, And of course, back then in North Maine woods, there was no rules.
Let's say, how do you go about getting baits? Just pick and choose where you wanted to.
Pick and choose, and put them out. So, and but my dad had established bait sites for what he and his friends used to go and hunt off. So he probably had a dozen. Where we ended up when I got done with 90. So the business changed, but that's how it started. It's like so the first 5 guys that came up, we had them in a cabin way on top of a mountain. Just nothing there, outhouse and everything else. And they killed 5 bear, and they had the best time that they ever had, and they were coming back. Well, it started like, well, okay, that was 5, now it's 7, and. Well, I can't put 7 in that camp. Like, well, we got to split them up. Let's do 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And this obviously was after they had changed it from a spring season. We couldn't do the spring season. That was actually he broke his back in 85. So it was after that.
No.
That's sort of how that happened.
Was the fall season still 4 weeks back then?
Yeah, you could. It was a 4-week season in the fall. Yep. And then of course it was the same, basically the same as it is right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and with the hounds, but like being up in Allegash now, it's like the hound hunting up home was not a big deal.
No,
we didn't have many hound hunters, and that came later. But it was bait hunters. But so I got looking at that after a couple of years, and I kind of made a plan for myself, and I was hoping that by the time I was 30, I could sell my skidder and all that. I was able to do that all by the time I was 28.
Oh, yeah.
And still poor. Starting out.
So you've been guiding full time since 28, then more or less.
Yeah, more or less. Now it's like anything else. I think that's probably one of the handicaps for young people trying to get into the 4-season business. Like what you and I do, is that. It's very hard to get into it. There's a lot to it. And you can't just quit your day job and say, okay, now I'm going to be a 4-season.
Well, they say it's 4 seasons, but it really might as well only be 2 because it ain't like you get a full 4 seasons worth of income. You always have those down times in all of the seasons.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing about, another thing that you're very well familiar with is how a guide service works, like mine, Tyler Kelly Camps. Me and my wife run that, and it's you can't have full-time employees. No. So, but I do right up until I retired last year. I do a 4-season, legitimate 4-season. Because I would take 1 or 2 parties of ice fishermen.
It says you and your wife doing it,
right? That we can handle. Then in the spring of the year, especially with the advent, here's another thing. And another advent is the muskie. I could fill my summer with musky fishing, but I would take 1 trip or 2 trips a week in the summer, So, and then, again, with the canoe business, the rentals and all that, transports, shuttles on the river, blends right into bear season, the baiting season and everything else, and that blends into the moose and all, so it is a 4 season, but it's hard to, it would be hard for young people today to just start from scratch. You know what I mean? And
I didn't start from scratch, but we started up here going on 10 years, and it's been rough for us, and we had a lot already established.
Exactly, and that's what I'm. But you yourself, you came from Southern Maine where you were doing like what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. You had your work, and you started guiding on the side, and you could blend those two until you guys were at a position or a point that you said, "Look, a place came for sale in Allagash, Maine."
Yep.
And you took a chance.
It's now or never.
It's now or never. So and that's the nature of this business. It's not like
it's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
It's not a living. It's a lifestyle.
And you got to have everybody in the family in that lifestyle. They all got to agree. But and I'm fortunate because that's exactly what my family and yours too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
This episode was brought to you by Pelletier Taxidermy. For all of your taxidermy needs, give Troy a call. Troy specializes in bear, moose, and deer, located in Fort Kent, Maine. Make sure you get that memory to last a lifetime on your wall.
But that's sort of what happened with me and getting the service going. And it, as you well know too, part of the reason I believe, my own opinion, that the bear hunting was so successful and is still so successful. Not the harvest part, but the business part that we do is with working through North Maine Woods.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to help us.
Well, you remember back the days when they weren't so pleasant to go to the meetings.
Yeah, I remember, because I went to the very first bear meeting, and that all come about whenever, again, my own personal opinion is that the North Maine Woods, whenever North Maine Woods started losing summer business, but prior to that, and that's because families weren't going out camping or they weren't taking, the kids were staying on the couch and doing their thing, and so, but prior to that, the camping and the summertime traffic was a big part of North Maine Woods business. So whenever the bear hunting started getting pretty big and guys were jumping in and saying, wait a second, I got to have 10 more baits. I got to go over here and somebody's too close. And, fisticuffs started. Not with me because I was a lot faster than anybody else.
You always get around, right?
I could outrun anybody. Yeah, and not ashamed to. But North Maine Woods, there was too many complaints. Again, this is my opinion. Too many complaints going to North Maine Woods about, guys. And so they called a meeting. They said, everybody that, let's do this, let's sit down. So we did. We went down, and basically it was when I come out of that meeting, the message from North Maine Woods was, you guys straighten this out because we don't need you at that time, And we ended up through North Maine Woods having the Bear Hunt Council meetings, So if you had a complaint, you could go call down there, go down, sit down, talk it over, and hash things out. Then they started with their plans of designated areas. Through the years, that's developed to where it really works now. But, so we went from being a pain in the butt to, as you well know, now being somewhere around a quarter of their
income
operating costs, money. So that was the cooperation between outfitters and North Maine Woods was a big factor to me in how well things are run in North Maine Woods, where we don't have those conflicts with other outfitters.
We're pretty lucky up where we are.
We are extremely lucky to be where we are. And also, the outfitters, all of the outfitters that attended these meetings every year and whenever we had to have them, were instrumental in bringing their ideas to North Maine Woods to develop the system that we have now. I always give North Maine Woods a lot of credit, and the people that were running it at the time. They were willing to work, work with us, and they saw the value in it, and it was getting there, and so I think they've been very fair through the years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, like moose hunts, did your father participate in some of the first moose hunts and guiding?
Actually, he guided on the very, very first one.
Really?
Yeah, and it was friends of ours deer hunters of ours from Connecticut. Yeah, and that's a story in and of itself. But, and that was something that I was not prepared for. Because nobody moose hunted.
Yeah.
It was illegal. You couldn't do that. So whenever it first went into effect, now that was before I started my guide service.
I think it went in like 80, right?
80 skipped 81, or it was 81 skipped 82. I can't remember. So when I didn't actually, as a guide, start guiding till after I got my guide's license, but I had been taking people out. Friends of ours would get a tag. It was like 50 tags or whatever it was, and they'd say, well, wait, is there any moose up there? Yeah, let's go. But one of the funniest stories for me is when I first started, I was scared to death because I was taking a paying customer, and I thought I knew what I was doing. And I'm pretty confident I can get him a moose, but so I take one of my very first customers, and I had a brand new moose call, buck expert moose call, so I was learning how to use that. Well, years later, I get a CD in the mail from a company that wanted to come up and set up and do videos of our moose hunts, and they were going to all the outfitters. Hey, for this much, we'll come up and we'll videotape, give it to your hunters, and tell them, hey, we'll come up and do this. And so the CD was of some of the work they had done. So my wife and I were sitting in my house that we lived in before and I'm sitting on the couch and listening to the video, and you hear this guy blowing on the call. And back then they had those great big cameras,
Yeah.
And so it was a little grainy. And I looked at my wife. I said, "Man, that guy don't know what he's. That guy is not doing that right, And we kept watching it and everything else, and I'm looking at it, and every once in a while, we'd show the guy, would be calling, I said, "Man, that's." And it was hard for me to listen to, I know how good that call is. It's the same call I had. So it wasn't but a couple of minutes into that video, and I'm watching it, and I look in here, there's 2 hunters in the road, a nice big bull and 2 cows running down the road. And you hear the guy saying, no, don't shoot, because, you might hit one of those cows, I'm thinking, it just light went on like that. That's me. So the whole time I was criticizing that guy for calling. That was me calling with that call for the very first time I ever used it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We ended up killing a moose. But
quite a
still, it was like, gee.
Quite a coincidence that come back around full circle.
Come back full circle, yeah. It was, and those guys were great guys too. And I think it was one of the sons that was on the trip that had the camera, and I think they were the ones that started it. So, but yeah, I'll never forget. I looked at my wife. I said, "Oh, gee, that's me." Yeah, but yeah. So, and moose hunting too. Like I said, that was whenever that started, then that was a big boost. To what we could do. And it helped outfitters put more into their places. So, yeah, it wasn't just about the bear hunting.
Now, like the deer and the canoe trips, those must have been like 2 of the original guiding sources up there.
Yeah, the deer for sure. And the Allagash Wilderness Waterway was probably the first from, whenever they started in 66 as being a waterway, that opened the door for, people to say, okay, I'm going to do this. And the white-tailed deer is how we actually started, how my dad started guiding was white-tailed deer. Nobody really hunted bear.
The bear was like a nuisance thing back in the day.
Yeah, and and you can before 81 or 80 or 81, before that, it was like you can shoot a bear on sight. There's no season. Basically no season. It's spring season, but it's like, but nobody like back then, nobody really bothered to shoot a bear because they didn't utilize it. You know, most bear were taken in the fall. Way back, in the fall, we'd have a lot of, we had good mass crops and stuff in the fall. And, guys that would come up, stay in our cabin, and we had 2 cabins in the woods there, would stay there. They would go home with 1 or 2 bears and, 3 or 4 bucks, you know what I mean? But then that started, obviously, as you know, today, is that slowly went away. The deer hunting. Yeah. Get down to where, it's not much we don't do much in the deer hunting this year at all. And I quit guiding deer hunters about 5 years ago. Yeah.
Now, what was it like when you first started guiding deer?
When I first started guiding deer, there were some deer around and some big bucks. I tell this to people all the time. I've never shot a big one myself.
Mm-hmm.
I got some nice ones, and I always shot horns. Yeah. I was looking for something that was going to be a nice rack, So the biggest deer that I ever shot, field dress 226. Well, at the time that I would hang the deer that, a nice big rack 10 point that weighed 226, people from the valley and around would drive by and they say, oh, yeah, that's a nice one. And keep going because they heard about the 250 and 260 that was shot up the road.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what a big deer was back in the 80s and stuff was, okay, if you got something around 240, you got a big deer.
Mm-hmm.
You got, anything from 2 to 220. Well, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing how that's all changed.
Yeah,
now you get 1-200, you set a milestone.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and there's not quite as many, but our deer herd's doing better.
I think it's bouncing back some in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's there's it used to be that you would go out and you would have 5-6 bucks that you knew were way over the 200 pounds. And you and depending on the day and where you're going to be, you would say, well, I'm going to try and pick up this guy or that guy, But now, it's like, you might want to jump on one that you think is 180 because,
Yeah. You don't pass up too many.
No.
You must have some stories about guiding deer hunters back in the day.
Yeah. Most of the deer hunting guiding that I did, would have been out of tree stands and ground blind.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the people that I took, and remember now, this is back in the 80s, late 80s and 90s when I first started taking deer hunters. It wasn't the road system like it is today, so it was, legitimately some big woods, and so a lot of these guys, it's prior to the GPSs and all that stuff, so whenever I would do the preseason scouting for, and I find a nice big trail, but it's half a mile, 3/4 mile back in the woods, you'd have to explain the topography for them, and say, hey, you just go right straight in. This is the bearing. Lead the road right here, and this is the bearing. Go in there. I'd have a ground blind or whatever. A lot of the time they would come back out and they say, well, yeah, I couldn't find that, or, it wasn't there or whatever. Well, it's just a lot of times guys just didn't get there, no disrespect to them.
Yeah.
It's just, it was a different world,
You try that nowadays, you can have 100 lost people if you send 100 people in the woods.
Yeah.
Most of them won't be able to figure bearing to get back out to you.
Well, yeah, that's all they have. Everybody's got their cell phones now and Onyx and those other programs, and which are great, for what they do. But it's kind of hard to get lost when there's
It's amazing how far technology has come.
Yeah. But yeah, and I used to take guys that wanted to come up and do the tracking one-on-one, and I took guys like that. Very few of them, and again, no disrespect to, these guys, but very few of them lasted long enough for them to actually track a deer down and kill it, simply because they didn't, they wouldn't have maybe the stamina or whatever, and I'd look back and they wouldn't be there, and I'd get all excited because I know, you're looking at everything's all, man, he's right here, you look back and there's nobody there, so you'd have to go back,
You might have a lot more snow back then than what we get now, right?
We had a lot more snow. Yeah. The first weeks of November, we had tracking snow right through,
We haven't had that since 2018. I think 2019 is the last year I remember.
Yeah. Well, now it's Thanksgiving week. You might not have tracking
So
snow.
it was muzzleloader really this week when we finally had decent tracking snow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's changed a lot, and the guys that are consistent and still coming from years and years are they're trackers. They're confident trackers, and most of them are from Vermont.
Let's say Vermont. Yeah.
Those are some.
Might as well call it Little Vermont during deer season. That's mostly what you see the license plates.
Yes, sir. They can hunt,
Yeah.
and so it's a pleasure to have. Well, anyone that can get out there and do that, it's a pleasure to have them in your camp. Now I don't guide anymore, but I want to check with them every day. Like, how you do? It's like
that's one of the best parts of the day is coming back at night and just listening to all the lies that you hear.
Yeah. But no, it's things have changed a lot from when I started. Again, going back to what I was saying about starting, and all that you have to go through to get to the point where you can just say, I don't have to do anything else. I can guide. I got clientele. You got to build a clientele. You got to build trust in clients. You got to be successful, and it takes a lot.
There's enough business out there too that outfitters should work together. I mean, since we moved up there, we've always worked hand in hand together with a few other outfitters. Like that's, I think, one of the biggest holdbacks for a lot of people is they don't communicate and they see someone as a threat instead of someone as a partner that can help them go along through as well.
Yeah, along with like what you're saying is like for me, I started from the very beginning. So. Like, so there was a couple of guys that had started prior to me and everything else, and they're still going, but we saw a lot of people come and go, going to set the world on fire and, and just, and not have that happen. But I started years ago through what I learned from being with North Maine Woods, or working with North Maine Woods to settle problems and stuff like that, like for me, I was better off. Well, you know me personally, right?
Yeah.
I can get along with everybody.
Yeah.
And even with people that don't like one another, I can work either side of that. So that's what I started doing was, I'd get a line on some really good bait, and I would go ask every outfitter, "Do you want any of this? Because I'll get the whole truckload and we'll split it, or we'll share, or we'll help." And it took several years to gain trust, enough that they realized that you can work together and you're not hurting one another because of the system we have through North Maine Woods. I can't go and bear hunt on your properties, where I can't go there. You know what I mean? So there are rules through North Maine Woods that allows us to be more helpful to one another. You know what I mean? And that's the truth. I think if you went outside of North Maine Woods, and you'll find that it's not quite that way because people are still jumping.
I come from outside of the North Maine Woods, and I trust you.
Yeah.
It's night and day difference.
Yeah. So, and the reason being is not that we're better people, is that if we don't toe the mark, they kick us out.
You get a lot to lose.
You get a lot to lose, So, and again, that's a tribute to being able to work through North Maine Woods, in my opinion. So, but yeah, and I know when you first came, you hadn't got your place yet, and I met you and Sean down at the lodge. Yeah, and Sean introduced me to you and everything else, and I knew immediately after we got talking that this guy don't trust me. Even with Sean telling you, hey, this guy, if you need something, he'll come along, he'll help you and everything else. But it was where you're coming from. Yeah. It probably took you a little while to understand.
It is, and it's a different area. Like, I mean, it's might as well be a state of its own, like the Valley region.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we were talking about that earlier, that the only place I think left in the state when I moved up here was Chamberlain's, where you'd walk in and Judy be in there smoking a cigarette and there's ashtrays all around, charge accounts, don't even know you from a hole in the wall. Like, you don't see that elsewhere. Yeah. And still to this day, a lot of that still takes place up there.
Oh yeah. It's a small community. We all, like I said, there's some, over the years, there have been people that come and went, but when they came, they didn't come to, to necessarily stay. It was going to be, I'm going to be here for the bear season and everything's going to be great. But then when they leave and go back there, wherever they come from, there was nobody there to maintain what they had.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just, either you're all in, to me, to be a 4-season, either you're all in or
all out.
all out, you know, so, yeah. But, and the other thing too, you know, that I find that's changed a lot. Well, I'm 64, so I'm older, and it's tough. Like for moose especially, for us, it's tough to find legitimate moose guides.
Yeah.
You know, not because there aren't legitimate moose guides. There's a lot of them, and young guys, but they have regular jobs. You know, and they get, 2 weeks a year,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or 3 weeks a year.
They got a young family.
And they got a young family and
Yeah.
everything else. And they're awesome guides. I mean, but it's, so like for us, you know, we're aging out. The business, the moose hunting is not, but us old guys as guides, we are, you know, and, you know, so when the remoteness of the Allagash is wonderful, but it's also, could be a problem with, access to people that can, you know, do the job for a week, come up and do it for a week, whatever. If you were downstate, there would be a lot more people that do it. You know, I mean, there are good guides, a lot of great guides from all over the state of Maine. You know what I mean? But there's more of them that are based down there. So that's one of the things I see about the guiding. There's not quite as many. You're actually trying to find somebody that's either retired and still doing it, you know.
Or been working for 30 years and have 5 weeks of vacation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and don't mind taking 1 week here or there, you know. So that's kind of like the biggest issue we deal with is that right there. I don't deal with bear issue anymore because I'm
out of that.
And everybody told me I'd miss it, but I don't, and not in a negative way. Yeah. Not in a negative way. I don't miss it because for me, I was losing the things that made me a good bear guide. Mm-hmm. The ability to track and see very well, and just the physicality of it all.
I mean, the bear hunting aspect, that's 99% of the work. I don't care what anyone says.
That's work.
You work for 12 weeks for 4 weeks worth of reward.
Exactly.
And everyone shows up and sees it's all, you know, roses and candy there, but they don't see the 12 weeks before that from bushwhacking and that stuff, fighting mosquitoes off and horse flies and moose flies to get to that time when they're there. It's nice and cool. There's no bugs. It's not too hot.
Yeah.
The work's done. Like, to me, the vacation starts once the hunters get there.
Yeah. Speaking directly to that, you know, like the work that we have to do is, I don't know if people realize or not, but we open up all our own roads, right? If there's a culvert out, we fix it.
A lot of them roads that bird hunters take advantage of is because of a bear guide.
Exactly. So what the last bear referendum we had, I was talking to some bird hunters, and they were more like, I don't know about that, you know, that bear hunting, you know, and part of it because of hound hunting, and, you know, it was part of it. And I was asking them, I said, well, you guys like bird hunting up here? Oh, yeah, some of the best roads. And I said, yeah. I said, you know what'll happen if we don't bear hunt? Well, no. I said, well, all those nice roads that you like to walk down, or you notice all the bushes cut on both sides and everything. Oh, yeah. It won't be one of them. Yeah. You know, because, you know, we're the ones that maintain them. North Maine Woods doesn't, or any landowner is not responsible for maintaining roads for us to use. No. We are. Yep. So the hundreds of, or thousands of dollars that we put in a year to maintain old roads that are all dirt up for access for us to get to bait sites, that would all go away.
So the deer hunters use them, the moose
hunters use them, the moose hunters use them. Yeah. And you know what it's like up home when a road is left for just 2 years. If a road is left for 2 years, you cannot drive down that road.
Nope. Especially if it's
unless
wet.
You're me and you don't care. Yeah. But so there's a lot of, I think, as far as like the bear hunting, there's a lot of aspects of what we do for work in the North Maine Woods that people don't actually see, or, you know what I mean, or realize that, okay, well, geez, that was a bear hunter that opened 10 miles of road here that I'm having a great time on, you know. So, everything is connected one way or the other.
So,
I had a group up from Pennsylvania, and they came. Well, two of those guys came for. One was still coming. It's 32 years. He's been coming. Then we wounded. One of my hunters wounded a big bear, and so we went in that night looking for it, and it wasn't hit very hard, And I said, "Well, we're going to come back." That's what we went back. So one of the guys that was coming with us, we called him Big Earl, and unfortunately, Big Earl, he just passed away. We kept in touch for years and years, but he was a big man. He was, 350 pounds, and great guy. But he wanted to come video the track job. So we're tracking, or I'm tracking actually, and going right along. And the further we got down in there, the worse it got, the harder it got going. And Big Earl would say, "Wait," he said, "you're not going to find that. You can't find that. There would be no blood for a long time, But it was a big enough bear, and the ground was good enough that I can find that track, So anyways, we kept on going. I'll shorten it up a little bit. We kept on going, but it's like every 10 minutes, Big Earl says, "You're not going to find that." So he wanted to go back, And I had the hunter behind me and two other guys. I come to where the bear, the big bear, something else picked it up and took it. So it was a grassy swale. And here's the pug marks on the outside and the big drag of the grass right in the middle. So I stopped right there and I said, "Listen," I said, "we're tracking the big bear and the bigger bear just took it." They had a laugh for it. I said, "No, I'm serious." "Come look." And I showed them. And you could look up probably 150 feet, 200 feet. And there was a little round thicket, just as thick as it could be. And you could look at the grass and went right into that. So, and this is after like probably 3 hours of tracking. I said, "You guys stay right here. I'm going to circle that, see if he came under there." And I went around, circled around like that. He never come out of there. I said, "Well, he's in the middle." I said, "You wait." So I got on my hands and knees and went in there. Come to that bear that the hunter had shot, buried, covered up, half of it gone. And everything.
Yeah.
So anyways, Big Earl's videotaping all of this. So he comes in and they've seen the bear. And Earl looked at me and he says, "Wade," he said, "I cannot believe that you found that bear." And I looked at the camera. I said, "Earl, if I can't find it, it ain't dead." So they thought that was hilarious. Right? They come back the next year with T-shirts, and they made a custom knife for me with the Wade Kelly Master Maine Guide on the other side. It said, "If I can't find it, it ain't dead." So that went on for years. Yeah, they 1 year it's actually the second year that group come up, and that group stuck together for like 20 years. There'd be 5, 6 of them, 7 sometimes, But the second year, the very second year they come up, on a middle of the week, whatever, they went to Fort Kent. Well, they come back and they said that night after we hunted, they said, "We got something for you." It's all in videotape, but so we used to be in the little restaurant that my sister owns now. That's where I ran it, and things out of there. So everybody's around, and they had me a toolkit. And they kept taking stuff out of it like a knife and some string, and every time they take something out, it was like, "Well, we got you a knife because you don't ever have one. You take one of ours." So in the video, I say, "Yeah, I take one of yours because I got a nice knife collection now." But I didn't give it back. And then the string, every time we went in the woods and to tie a tag on, I'd ask them, "Well, you got your string?" "Well, no, I cut their shoelaces." I said, "Well, you didn't bring a string, so I'm taking your shoelaces." And they said, "Well, you can't do it." Flashlights and everything else. I cut a shoelace off and tied it up. And there was a bunch of other funny stuff in there.
Yeah.
That's the kind of relationships that you build after a while with your longtime clients. And it's always to me now, like our longtime clients are coming on a vacation.
Yeah,
They're not coming necessarily that they have to harvest a bear or anything like that. It's a vacation.
Well, that's one of my favorite parts about guiding is like you get so close to some that, they're more or less family.
Oh yeah.
Like, I talk to a lot of the clients more than I talk to even some of my own family members.
Yeah. You'll be like, my experience through the years too is like, this is my personal experience with some guys where I would get phone calls from them. Mm-hmm. And some of them had only been maybe 1 or 2 years, with us, but just to talk.
Yeah.
It was like, and you probably experienced this too. It was like you'd have one of them would kill a bear on Monday or Tuesday, and they want to ride around with you,
mm-hmm.
but they wanted to talk.
Yeah.
And a lot of what they wanted to talk about was things that they couldn't talk about
Well,
with their
as a guide, you're
their
a therapist.
friends or whatever. You were like a counselor.
As a guide, you're a therapist, you're a counselor, you're a
Yep.
relationship
Yep.
therapist, you name it, all
Yep.
the above. That's
Yep.
really what you are.
Yeah, and I actually, like, for me, I really appreciated that.
Yep.
You know, and you know that they had confidence enough that they could talk.
To
you know,
open
I
up.
don't know why it kind of sounds silly, but it was. Yeah, I always enjoyed that part. You know, like if somebody needed to talk, well, you were there, and
Mhm.
you're non-judgmental. You're
Yep.
not, you know,
You're not biased. I mean,
not biased or anything like that. You just so that was for me a good byproduct of being a guide.
now, we're not recommending to everybody, though, to approach a
No.
guy with all these situations.
No, something you don't want to be talking about. You know, but no, it's interesting the way it works. You know, and the way being a Maine guide as a career. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do. It's a great lifestyle. I mean, you know, that old saying, you know, if you love what you do, you'll never work. Well,
Yep.
I feel bad because, in my opinion, I haven't worked in years. I've been having, you know, and just look at all the hunts we get to go on.
Yeah.
And it's not about you actually killing anything,
No.
you know, but you see the eyes light up on when that first bull grunts,
Yep.
right? Or in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're still looking for the bear, and you know, when you look back and you know your client's right there behind you, they're somewhere, and you say, "Hey, come up here."
Yeah.
They know what that means. You know, it's like the hooping and yelling. And saying, "Did you get it? Did you get it?"
You can go from being a zero to a
Oh,
hero in a
yeah,
snap of a finger.
Yeah,
That's for
yeah.
sure.
So it's a lot. You know, it's a lot of fun. And again, like the fishing side came with the muskie. That's when we really started taking off guiding fishermen. But taking muskie fishermen, that it's a bucket list fish, and see them catch their very first muskie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, wow. You know, it's like,
It's excitement and enthusiasm.
Yep.
And, you know, just
Yep.
something that we take for granted that we see every day and we do every day.
yeah.
For
Yep.
them to come and do it,
Yep.
it puts in perspective in my eyes of
Yeah. I do have one good story about how that works. How that perspective is. I got two guys come fishing,
Mhm.
brook trout fishing, and they were older, and so they wanted to get in the brooks and fish, you know. So I took them to a brook, an old bridge out, and I sent one up and one down. And I said, now in an hour, I want you to both back down here, you know. So the one that went up the brook, I looked and he's coming down. I said, okay. So it was his brother that didn't come back. And so we waited for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I said, you know, I'm going to go down and see, hopefully, you know, make sure he's okay or whatever, you know. So I went down the brook, just out of sight. And this was just a little brook, you know, just around the turn. And there he was standing there and he was fishing by a stump, you know. So I thought, well, he's on his way back up. So I walked down. I said, how's it going? And there was a little pool there, and it was right full of 4 and 5 inch brook trout.
Yeah.
And he was having a blast. You know, he just thought that was, and he look at the colors, look how pretty that fish is, and he put it back in. I said, did you not catch anything bigger downstream? He said, I haven't left. So the whole time,
far
he
as you
just,
made it.
I could have yelled at him.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm, you know, to your point about the perspective, he was having the best time catching those little fish, what we would have assumed little fish, you know. And that was his day. It was great. And there's one thing that I learned is that my perspective of what is a good day of fishing is not necessarily what the client that's coming up there to do.
Yeah.
You know, because we do it every day. I was embarrassed that all they were catching was 4 and 5 inch brook trout, and they thought that was great and want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I had to learn. You know, and you do learn as
You do
go.
as you get going. The older you get, the more you realize that. I mean, it's as far as like just a cow hunt. I've had people more ecstatic about being able to harvest a cow than I have a 50-inch bull.
Yep.
You know, it's all everyone looks at it differently.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. There's nothing like turning around and looking and like seeing the happiness and the joy in someone that just completed something that they thought was a lifelong dream, because technically you're the one as a guy that helped make that lifelong dream come true.
Absolutely. And that is true. And, you know, it's like, and for me though, part of it too, some of the most successful, the part that lets you know that, to me, lets you know that you've been appreciated, is when you have a client that is not successful.
Mm-hmm.
but can't say enough good about you and the work and the hard work. And we went to the right places, but hey, the fish weren't biting. You know, I know they were there. I saw a big one jump over there. I know they were there. You know, we're all disappointed because we want them all to catch it and get everything that they want. You know, but when you have a client that's had not the most successful trip, but is still looking at you like, man, this is great. Well, that's what you're striving for.
Because it was a success in memories. And
Exactly.
in the harvest, it wasn't, but the memories they made was very successful in their eyes.
When I first started, I thought that no one would ever come back unless they all got what they wanted and the biggest thing that ever walked. You know, so I was always nervous, sweating bullets and everything else. And it took a while to learn that these people just want you to work hard. Mm-hmm. They want to look at what you have. They want to be able to, like bear hunting, they want to be able to walk in and see that your setup is nice and wind is right and all that. You know, stuff that they know about, you know, and they want to see the effort, you know, and that's what makes, that's the difference between people that are in business for a long time and people that are in it for a short time.
Yeah.
You know? No disrespect, but I'm just saying it's like anything else. You know? Yeah.
If you had some words of advice for someone starting out, what would it be?
What I would tell anyone starting out is, I tell a lot of people this, young people this too, is that find an outfitter that you can go and maybe volunteer your time. Not saying that you have to do stuff for nothing, but you know, like as a mentorship, you know, to give you some real practical experience, you know, because you don't really necessarily get a chance to do that any other way, you know. That's why one of my things about the guide licensing, you know, years and years and years ago, they were trying to change things up a little bit, and part of what I thought would have been a good idea was to have an apprenticeship, you know, a year or whatever, you know, to attach yourself to, you know, a reputable guide service, and that gives you that experience. So part of my own experience about getting my guide's license is, you know, when I went down to get my guide's license, because I wanted this to be my lifestyle. And it was always what I did. From the age of 10, I had a pack sack and traps, you know, and I was allowed to go wherever I wanted to, you know. So I lived the life, you know, but I wanted to make it my livelihood. So I had to go. I'm Irish, so I'm really like, I hate it when they tell me I have to do this. But so you know, I got to go down and I got to take a test.
You got yours when you had to take a test. You weren't old enough to get it from the local warden then.
I took a test. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, you know, that's what I got to do, because we were getting to where like I could do this. My plan, like I talked about earlier, is like this could happen, you know, but I got to get a license. So, anyways, I go down to take my oral boards, and I come into the place and I sat down, and I'm white and I'm sick to my stomach. And the sweat's rolling off me, you know, because I got people coming and this is what I want to do. There was a young guy there ahead of me, and he was sitting there and waiting. He had just come out of there, and he was waiting to see if he got his license. So I was so nervous, I would have talked to an ant on the floor. So I talked to him a little bit, and he said he wasn't from Maine. And I believe he said something. He was going to college, and there was like an extra credit course or whatever, it was a guide course. And he had taken it and thought, well, what the hell? You know, I'll come down and take it. So I said, so you like to hunt and fish? And he said, well, no, I don't. And I never really hunted or fished. He said, he liked to hike and stuff like that. So I'm thinking he's going after his recreations, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, they call him back in. A few minutes later, he comes back out, and I said, how'd you do? And he said, I got him. Oh, so congratulations. And you got your recreational? He said, no. He said, I'm a master. You know, and I said, well, he said, I decided I'd take all three. You know, they do it all. So back then, I guess, you know, they did all three, you know. And I'm looking at him, and I said, oh, well, yeah, great, you know, awesome. And I'm thinking, I was so mad. I was thinking, all I could think of was, here I am, spent my whole life. I'm 28 years old. I've done nothing but hunt and fish. and I might not pass this darn test, you know. And so anyways, fortunately I did pass it. But from that day I thought, wow, you know, that it kind of lessened the mystique of that Maine Guide for me. Because, you know, it's like, wait a second, I thought these guys were all supposed to, if you carried a license, man, you were like, you had done something, you know? And so that bothered me for a few years. And so I was an advocate of like an apprenticeship for anyone that would want to do that. Now, that being said, I thought, you know, like with the advent of all the schools and stuff like that, we, you know, the schools, no disrespect in the schools. I think they're a great idea. I got my whole family went through them and they got their licenses and stuff. But it's just that it's a school that teaches you how to pass the test. You know, this is what you need to know to pass this test. But you know, you don't get the experience by that. So there's quite a few people that were doing that and taking the test that really didn't have a background in that. They were just going to get their guy's license. So, you know, it bothered me. You know, so but you know, and I think after a while the state realized it because they implemented the 10-year.
For the masters.
Yes, for the masters. You couldn't just walk in there and get a license and say, hey, I'm a master Maine Guide. You had to prove.
It's
and
like
I think that was a great thing.
10 years and so many hours.
10 years, 240 hours. And it's individual, you know, so you after 10 years in the field and documenting 240 hours or whatever it is in, say, hunting, you could apply for a hunting master, you know. But prior to doing that, they, when they were going to do that, they put out a big test, you know, for people that already had their license that wanted to upgrade. If you could go down and pass this test, you know, they would upgrade you to a master or so, which I thought, you know, was fair. And but yeah, to me, like now, this is years ago. So now when you look at somebody with a master, there's some legitimacy to that. You know what I mean? And I'm not condemning or saying that the people that were taking the schooling and just getting their license to get it, you know, a lot of those are just like me. They got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere.
Seemed like to me, it's like, I don't know, maybe you should really want to be doing it because it's what you want to do for a living or something, you know?
There'd be a lot less burnout if people would actually see what it takes instead of just showing up for a week and guiding while the hunter's there, see the behind the scenes of everything that goes on.
You know, and the other part of that too is like, is that we as 4-season outfitters and stuff, you got to have people that have their license and yes, maybe they can only use it for a week a year, but if they're willing to do it and they're good at what they're doing, then yes, that's a big help to us. So I'm not 100% condemning what that was like. It's just that, I don't know. You know, I met some guys, it was like 4 older guys. Can't remember, it was downstate. But when they came in, we were at an event somewhere, it's probably an archery shoot or something. When they came in, they had patches all over them, Maine Guide patches, and they were from New Hampshire. So I went over and talked to them. You know, I said, "So you guys are all Maine guys?" He said, "Not really." He said, "We went to the school as a group, as a forum, because it was fun." You know, and he said, "We went and did the whole thing, and we went and got our licenses in, but we're not planning on, running the business." You know, so there was a group of guys that were honest about what they're. You know, they went because it was a great thing. It was a whole weekend. It was a class out in Greenville or Jackson or something. You know, where it was more. It wasn't just inside the building. You know, they had a great weekend. You know? And but to me, you can tell because they had a Maine Guide patch on everything. But yeah, no. And I don't mean to be critical. It's just over the years, you know, it's like you see a lot. Yeah.
Especially in 38 years that you've been doing it.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, it's a lifetime of doing it. Even prior to having a guide's license, that's all you know. That's like for me, when I was 10 years old, you were looking for me. Well, you just find a brook someplace. You know, or if it was a fall, I'll find an old road because he's out there trapping something. Probably, you Well, it's like I was 12 years old and beaver trapping,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I had to walk everywhere.
Yeah.
Snowshoe, actually. My grandfather, they started using these conibear bear traps, you know, the 330s.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. So I wanted to use one, but geez, you know how those are
That's
bears.
quite rugged for a 12-year-old
Yeah.
to set.
So my grandfather had one that was in a fire, and it was weak.
Oh.
So he gave it to me, and I had a beaver out behind the Catholic church that I could not catch. You know? So I'm, you know, with the, you know, the foothold sets and everything else under the ice. So he gave that to me. Well, I went out, set that on the ice, got that all ready to go, and put both hands on that. So I'm 12 years old. I'm sitting there, I got both hands in a 330, and I'm about a mile and a half on snowshoes.
Yeah.
But it was a good thing it was weak because I got it down and I could step on it, you know, and I got one off and I got my hands out of it. But that was a learning lesson for me. It's like, oh, okay, you know, it's like,
Don't stick your fingers in there.
don't do that. Yeah, that's bad. And I never told anybody because they'd have taken the trap away from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but I did. I set the trap and went back out and I caught the beaver. And the reason I couldn't catch him in number 4 is he only had one front leg.
Oh, really?
That's my excuse.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, so it's like and I think you're the same way as far as like, if, you know, if I follow you on, and I follow your brother, you know, Aaron, and it's like, that's what you guys do.
Yeah.
You know, you're outdoors people, you're hunting, you're fishing, you're something in the outdoors, you know. Yeah. It's not just what I've done or you have done from the day we got our guy's license. It was the lifestyle before that made you want to do that.
Started out when I was eight years old there, and my parents gave us a BB gun, and we didn't have PlayStation and that stuff there. Christmas vacation and stuff like that was out in the woods, you know, hunting squirrels or whatever. You know, it starts from what you get instilled in you as a young one. Not saying that you can't start in your, you know, older years and do it, but it's a lot harder to do that than it is to learn the life skills of being in the woods and that if they instilled in you from the beginning.
And to that point too, is like for years we had this group of guys come up to do the river. Oh yeah, so I'd drop them off every year. And we talk all the way up wherever, you know, about hunting, and none of them hunted.
Yeah.
You know, long story short, one of them decided he was going to bear hunt, so he went and got his license and everything else, and he come up and he went bear hunting. He had his grandfather's rifle and he never hunted, but he shot a bear. So the very next year, or he skipped a year. The very next year he called, and another one of his buddies from California that come canoeing all the time, never hunted. Whole family's anti-hunter hunting and everything else like that. And he calls, says, yeah, you know, he wants to come hunting. Bring him up. So he come up, he took all the courses and everything else. They went to the range and they, you know, gun safety and all that. He wanted to be safe. Took him out Monday night and he killed a 420-pound bear. You know, but now they're hunters. Now they're not just coming to my place, they're planning trips everywhere. You know what I mean? Like they're going pheasant hunting. They're, you know, it was something that they didn't know because they didn't grow up in it. They didn't know that they enjoyed that. Or that would be something that they would.
It's an addiction. I mean, 90% of the people that say like they're against hunting or this that I witness, the ones that 90% of them that actually try it, end up sticking with it because they realize that it's not about the thrill to kill. Like it's about everything that goes in, you know, into it, being outside, seeing the scenery, taking in, you know, the outdoors, the noises from the birds, you know, just witnessing things that you would not normally witness sitting inside.
Yeah. Another to that point again is just exactly that. It was one of our hunters came and he brought his 14-year-old son. And like I said, you know my place, and you know, with the little brown house he used to live in, you know, it's probably 100 yards or 200 yards from the little restaurant. So we come out of we're walking over to my house. These guys have been with me long enough that they stayed at my house before I was married. They just stayed with me, you know. And upstairs in the bedroom, I had cots set up for them. You know, I mean, it was like family coming. You know?
Yeah.
So the 14-year-old come out and he's walking down the road to the house in the evening, just ahead of me. And he kept looking up like that. He'd look like that. I'd stop behind him and I'd look, you know, I'd go like that. And he'd put his hand down, he'd walk a little further and he'd stop and he'd look up, you know, and he'd come to the porch and he was looking all over the place. And I'm looking at what the, and his name was Eric. I said, Eric, what are you looking at? Well, the stars. I said, the stars? And he said, well, yeah. He said, we don't we don't see the stars like this. And I've never seen stars like this. You know, and I thought there was, you know, a UFO or something flying around up there. You know, like, but yeah, it was just so stuff that we take for granted.
Yeah.
You know, two of my moose hunters one time see a cow down this dead end trail, and had a bull permit. I said, "Get out, start walking down. You never know that, you know, it could be a bull following that, you know, right across the road." So they're walking down. They're, you know, I can tell I'm watching them. They're both hunters, though, you know what I mean? And they're watching it. Then all of a sudden, both of them go right in the ditch. Cow takes off. Right behind the cow comes a nice bull, comes out, steps broadside, and they're both in the ditch, looking down into the ditch, you know. Like, I yell, you know, and they come up. The bull, you know, no shots fired. And I drove down and said, "What were you doing?" He said, "Well, there's a flower down there." And one of them is like a, you know, sort of like a botanist guy, you know, and that was a flower that was, you know, rare or whatever. And he was just like, when he saw it, you know, it was like, wow.
Awestruck.
Yeah, you know, it's like, wow, look at that. And then the bull goes across the road, you know, but, you know, they didn't care. They had, you know what I mean? It's like part of those stories like that are part of how I learned that, you know, listen, it's about, you know, the total experience, and not just the, you know, those guys didn't need to kill they wanted one, you know, obviously, and they did end up getting the bull, but the stuff that they saw outside of the hunt, you know, was what was most important to them.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the biggest thing to me, is the memories that you create, you know, the experiences, the stuff that you learn more than the kill.
Yeah,
I mean, anybody can grab a gun and kill an animal.
Yeah.
But it's what you make leading up to it and after the fact that makes it memorable.
Yeah. And it's like, for me, you know, I had to learn that. I learned that through my clients as I was learning to guide, basically, you know, and learning people. You know, and if you're not a people person,
Wrong business.
you're in the wrong business. You know, you've got to be able to listen, and you've got to be able to, you got to be a people person. You got to want them all to succeed, you know. But yeah. Been an interesting ride.
A good one at that.
It's a good one at that, you know, and like I said, having good people around, having good outfitters around that, you know, it might have taken a little while, but even you, I bet you, like, you've only been there how many years now?
10 years, man.
10 years. Even you've seen people that when you originally got here, maybe you didn't get along with or whatever. You've seen the transition from that to
where it is now.
Where it is now, you know what I mean? And that's just 10 years. You know, so.
No, I mean, it's slowly transitioned.
Yep.
As long as we keep everything transitioned the right way, we'll be good. But.
Yep. Yeah, and the way you do that, like for where we are, is that you just maintain helping others. You know, help other outfitters. They're not going to hurt you.
No.
You know, the thing that I always said too about if I got a call for something that I couldn't do, I would recommend somebody that I trusted. You know, and I would tell those people, "Now, listen, you got to go. These are the guys right here. You know, that you call it." And the reason being is that it's more important that someone that's coming to Maine and northern Maine for the first time have a good experience, whether it's with me or someone else. So if they're calling me and I can't take them and they're bound to come, I'm going to recommend people that I know are going to do a good job. Because when that person leaves, now he's never going to come back to me, because hopefully you've provided a good experience and want to come to you. But when that person leaves, he's had a great experience, and he talks about all of Maine as being a good experience.
And all of his friends come.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it doesn't, you know, you're promoting not individually your business as much as you should be a proponent of all of the good things about Maine and northern Maine. You know, so we should that's what we're repping, right? We're representing what's good about northern Maine, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's with me personally, you know.
100%.
Yeah. So that's been my philosophy. Yeah. So even though you didn't think so when you first met me.
Yeah. Well, everyone has their days.
Yeah. Everyone has their, yeah. So,
is there anything else you'd like to tell?
No, that's about it for my journey. I mean, we're still, you know, like my stepson and his wife have taken over the bear. You know, so that's like a great feeling, you know, all that work, you know, and all those sites and all those years of developing ways of doing things, you know, not that they would have to do exactly like me, but it's not gone.
It's still instilled.
It's still there, you know what I mean? And you know, like, you know, my stepson and my daughter-in-law, that they're perfect for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're so it's been nice to sort of like it's passing that down.
Easy transition.
Yeah.
Than just turning off sound at someone you don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, you know, it's part of it. I guess we all have to go through it. It's like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since we've been up here.
Yeah. It's hard for me to believe that I've allowed you to be here.
Oh, come on. We don't need to get talking about them stories.
Let's shut that off and really have a talk. No, it's been good. And like I said, the guiding industry, I think the Maine Professional Guides Association has done a good job. I've not always been a proponent of them, you know, which you shouldn't have to be, you know what I mean? We all got our opinions and everything else. But they've done a great job, you know, over the years, and very supportive. I belong to another group, the Maine Sporting Camps Association, which is vice president of that. And I still believe that was that group is very instrumental in getting things passed that support sporting camps and the guide industry as well. You know, so and hopefully, like you guys, both organizations will work together, which we have.
Yeah,
you know, and we've had you work together on things, you know, and I think it's in good hands, you know.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, I mean, I long said that we need to have younger people coming in, you know, and an age group that starts from young to middle to old.
Mm-hmm.
You transitioning in, I'm transitioning out.
Yep.
You for a short time, not you specifically, but I mean, on the age structure is that when the young one is coming into it, he gets a few years to be to look at what the older generation was doing, you know, and what worked and what didn't, and you know, so the transition is not just like we're all gone and now. Well, I'm not sure how this works. You know.
Oh yeah,
so,
100%.
Yeah. So, no, it's been good. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming, making the drive.
I'd like to thank you for having me. It's fun.
Thanks for joining us for this episode with Wade of Tyler Kelly Camps. If you enjoyed this, stay tuned. There'll be more to come. Until then, reminisce and think about the stories of you back at camp.